This video is now in session, and today we're going to talk about the eventual fall of small swing states. So, currently in the United States, we have a lot of swing states, in fact, a record amount. We have 6 from Nevada, Arizona, Texas, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, New Hampshire, and then the Nebraska and Maine's second district. So that total to more than 200 electoral votes, 204 electoral votes to be exact, and that is a lot for a presidential election because usually it's a lot more like 100 in just a few contested states. But in the future, we could see that kind of trend revert. We could see a period where we revert back to that trend where there are just a few swing states, and that's because this kind of electoral map, while it does while it does favor rural states in some ways, it also favors very big states in other ways. So in the future, we can expect more attention to be placed on states like Texas, Florida, and Georgia. All of these states have high electoral vote counts. Meanwhile, we might see less attention paid to states like Nevada and New Hampshire, which have less electoral votes. And obviously, that's the opposite of the purpose of the electoral vote, but ultimately, for campaigns, they want to be able to get as many electoral votes as possible with the fewest amount of stops as possible. And that means going to big swing states, which are promulgated in the Sun Belt, with Texas at 41 and Florida at 31, which is together it accounts for 72 electoral votes, a very, very large count for either party. If we just look at the presidential election in 2020, we can see that these states are becoming more competitive, and then the Rust Belt states have been competitive since 2016, and all of these states are big states. Meanwhile, you don't see as much focus as before on New Hampshire, Nevada, on the congressional districts that are competitive, and as well as Iowa. All of these states have faded in terms of relevancy in American politics, and they will continue to fade in relevancy as they become more and more partisan. New Hampshire, it could become Republican, but ultimately for Democrats, it's not going to matter that much because it's 4 electoral votes. The only races that matter in New Hampshire are the Senate races. Besides the Senate races, though, there's not much that matters in New Hampshire. Same thing goes with Nevada. At this point, really only the Senate race matters. For presidentially speaking, the Democrats won't need Nevada in the future, and they probably would not care about Nevada. Same way about how Republicans will probably care less and less about their states and go for bigger states like Texas, North Carolina, and Florida. Obviously, it's a lot less to an extent than Democrats, because Republicans do focus a lot right now on rural states and ex-urban states, but the future battlefields, I should say, the future battlegrounds are going to be in places like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Texas. Based on the 2020 election campaign spending, we've seen most of it spent along the Rust Belt and as well as these states, in addition to Arizona. And as you can see, that all of these states have double-digit electoral vote counts. North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Arizona. All of them have double digits in electoral vote counts. Meanwhile, in New Hampshire and in Nevada, as well as Iowa, these states, they don't have as much spending. You can see that it's a lot less. And this is compared to 2016, where a lot of money was spent in New Hampshire. So the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are realizing that they probably won't need to focus as much on smaller states. And that is why Democrats have started to spend in bigger states like Texas, how they've continued to spend a lot of money and pour a lot of money into Florida, even though they keep losing. Even though they lose, they still have to fight for it because it's a lot of electoral votes, and it's still a pretty competitive state. For Texas, this is a new thing that they've been spending. Back in the 2000s, you probably would have never imagined Democrats spending money in Texas, but it's going to grow in the future, especially in the 2024 and the 2028 election, where the Rust Belt is becoming more Republican. You'll see more spending on bigger states that are becoming more competitive for Democrats, and ultimately, that's good politics for them. It's a good strategy for them because they need to win as many electoral votes as possible without having to go to too many states. And if Democrats just get Texas and Florida, then they win. If Republicans get Texas and Florida, as well as Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, well, at that point they would get Ohio, but that would equate a win for them. And this is all through states that have 12 electoral votes or more. So it's a lot easier for Republicans and Democrats to go to these big states where they can concentrate ad spending rather than get a collection of small states and spend in more areas. So if Democrats would were to go to the small states, then they would practically have to win all of them. They would have to win New Hampshire, Maine 2nd District, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska 2nd District, and Nevada. And that wouldn't even get them to 270, which is the amount needed to win. They would have to get some of these big states in order to win. They would have to get Michigan, and even Michigan would not be enough. They would probably have to, if they wanted to do it in one take, they would probably have to go to Florida. So it's still using small states. It stresses the importance of big states like Florida and Texas, and that will be the future of our political races. We see that a lot of campaign stops have been in these big states, and they will continue to promulgate, especially in Texas, where even though there was only 3 visits in 2020 by the Democrats, in 2016 in 2012 there was practically 0 stops in Texas. So it's emerging in terms of these big states, and that is what should be taken away from this. And ultimately, if you're part of a small swing state, then prepare to have less importance in politics. Even though you might want to advocate for your state, it might ultimately just not go anywhere, with the fact that Democrats would only need Texas and Florida in order to win the presidential election, instead of having to go through 4 states in the Rust Belt or having to go through multiple states in the Sun Belt. So that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. This video is now adjourned, and I'll see you in the next one.